Before we start, I would like to ask your help to do two things. First, tell a friend or two who you think might like the show. And second, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The more reviews the show gets, the more likely it will even appear in search results. Thank you, and now on to the show.
They make the trek out to Burning Man for a week and a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the Shadow of the Man Show. I'm your host, Andy. Ta-da! It's that Andy. Today, our guest is Caveat Magister. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Andy. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So this is actually going to be the season finale. So you're episode 25. So you're capping off the end of my first season.
Is there a big twist at the end?
Well, you still live. Don't worry.
I'm going to be recurring character. All right. Multi-season arc.
Yeah. So where does it all begin? Like what was your first year and what got you to go to Burning Man?
Oh, geez. I have to tell you, just I'll answer the question, but I am probably the least interesting thing about Burning Man. I mean, they're part of the reason why I got into the whole, Burning Man philosopher thing is that I think the thing that we do is so interesting. And while yes, I'm fascinated by the people who do it, I I think we could get a lot more mileage out of talking about the thing itself than we could about my connection to it.
I
Just so
think just well, but briefly, kind of, because I think a lot of people will be kind of, want to know, like, who exactly you are, and then we can.
I I don't think anyone has asked that at all unless I've cut them off in traffic. But
Who the hell are you?
okay. Who's that asshole in the golf cart? I bet I get that one. Um, all right. So I was introduced to Burning Man the way that I think, multiple generations of burners were introduced to Burning Man when I had an artist friend who started pestering me incessantly about this really stupid sounding party in the desert that I ought to go to. This would have been 2002, 2003, something like that, when a artist friend of mine named Sandra Carr she had gone out on I'm going to buy an RV and take it all around the country and just do that thing kind of trip. And she was driving along with her kids. She was in Nevada. She pulled into a Walmart parking lot in order to get some rest. And she noticed that the Walmart parking lot was full of other RVs. And she thought, well, this is interesting. I wonder what's going on. So she's a sociable sort. So she walked out and asked some of them, hey, what are all of you guys here for? And they said, oh, we're going to Burning Man. And she said, Burning Man, what's that? And they told her, and she said, can I come? And those were the days when you absolutely could. And
Yeah.
so they said, great. And she said, great. And so she went to Burning Man. And a couple of weeks later, she called me from Colorado, where she was now living with someone who she had met in Black Rock City, and
Of
said, oh
course.
my God, you have to do this. And I heard her tell me about it. And I said, yeah, I'm not really a camping person. And going out to the desert to camp and look at statues, is that what you're talking about? No, no, you've got the wrong guy. But she kept pestering me, and then she started inviting me out to at least go to some regional events with her and attend some parties. And I'll fly out to see my friends, so sure. And so I started going to some of the regional events out there and some of the informal parties out in that neighborhood. And I had to admit, I'm not a party guy. I had never been into parties per se. It just always seemed like if you had a bunch of interesting people, you could come up with something more interesting to do. But all the same, I had to admit, I enjoyed these events. They were onto something. They were funny and personal and intense and interesting in a way that I did not associate with conventional parties or gatherings. And so I was intrigued. And then so I kept doing that, and then for completely unrelated reasons, I moved to San Francisco near the end of 2006, and I stopped by Sandra's place on the way there, and she was working on a art project that had gotten funding from the org. So I, stayed a week or so and helped out, and then went to San Francisco. And a little bit later, she called me from the road and said, "Okay, I'm on the road to Burning Man with my project, and a member of my crew just dropped out, which means I have his ticket, and you actually did help with the project, so I want you to come and you can camp with us. We'll take care of everything. You just need to bring a tent and get a ride there." And well, at that point,
Oh,
I was in San
trust.
Francisco. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anyone except the girl I'd moved there to be with. And so I really didn't have any excuse not to. So I said, okay, sure, why not? And that was how I went to my first Black Rock City. And I had to say, I did not have the kind of it blew my mind transformative experience. My life is different now thing that so many people do. That was not what I had at that time. But I
Yeah.
had to admit, it was good. It was interesting. And so since I was living in San Francisco and didn't know anybody, I thought, well, they take volunteers. And I admit it seems kind of weird to volunteer for what at the time was a for-profit organization, an LLC, but I need to meet people, so why don't I go do that? And that's more or less how the whole thing started.
How long did you go for? Was it like the full on week, or were you just like, oh, I'll just try this out for like dabble just for like a long weekend or something?
No, no, full week. I got a ride off Craigslist to go down there with some people.
Wow.
This was the only time getting a ride on Craigslist actually worked for me. It never worked for me again. And there were three of us going down there, and only two of us came back. It was yeah, the third member of our group just never showed up to the appointed spot, and we looked around for her. We did all the things, and finally we were like, okay, I guess guess we have to move on. And fortunately, later she called us and said, "Yeah, no, sorry, I got involved with things, and I spaced on you and got a ride elsewhere." So it
Hmm.
was okay. But yeah, no, three of us went down, two of us came back. It was for the whole week.
Wow, that's incredible. No, it's funny because like I remember for like many years, Burning Man felt. I mean, not for me personally, but just about everyone else around me, like the Love Boat. I mean, there were so many like torrid relationships where it's
Yep.
like, we get there on Saturday and by Sunday night, like they're like, they just met like not even 24 hours before, but it's like they're planning their wedding on the playa. And then like within like 36 to 72 hours later, it's just like, oh, I never want to see that person ever again.
Yeah, many years later, I would go to Burning Man with a woman I was seeing. I think this was 2019, and we weren't camping together, but we went on a day-long playa date, and we would estimate that we had the entirety of our relationship in that 24-hour playa date. That we went through the whole thing, um, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. 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 I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the show before, but yeah, so I first went in '96 when I was still living in San Francisco, and I remember like after coming back, and it was just for like a weekend, kind of like a long weekend, it's like 3 days, and of course, it's like everybody you get back from Burning Man, and you're just like every third word out of your mouth is just like it was awesome Burning Man, it was great Burning Man, yeah, Burning Man,
yeah,
Burning Man, Burning Man, Burning Man,
yeah.
and so for about the first like 45 minutes, my then girlfriend, now wife, was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh, tell me more. That's kind of cool." And then it's like, "Okay, you can stop talking about that now." You
Yeah, of
know?
course. No, we really are. We can get insufferable. I have long made it a point not to talk to strangers about Burning Man unless it comes up elsewhere. Uh, I've had these moments where I've been in a bar and the subject of Burning Man came up, and I just kept my mouth shut until one of the people there who had never been was just like, "I really wish there was somebody who could explain this thing to me." And I went, "Okay, well,
Okay, fine.
as chance would have it, I am in fact one of the definitive explainers of Burning Man to people. So, all right,
It's
but
like you had
otherwise,
to ask the magic question.
yeah, but otherwise, I try to keep quiet about it.
No, you should at least have gotten a drink out of it. It's like, okay, if you buy me a drink, then I'll explain it to you. Yeah, so in all these years, my wife has never once been to Burning Man. Like, her whole thing is like, if it's going to be hot, there has to be water nearby. You can go swimming like an ocean or something. And she doesn't like crowds, and she doesn't like hippies. Like,
Sure.
so it's kind of like check, check, check. So for me, it's like my experience on the playa. I don't know who was I joking around about this with. I think it was Jenny. It's like I may have the singular distinction as being like the one person who's never had sex on the playa, like willingly,
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember like God, it was one of those like early 2000 years. That it was the regional back when it was the regional information center, or the regional network center. That was one of
Mhm.
my babies I'd started, and I was sitting with this random guy. We're talking, and I was talking about this stuff, and I was like, like I'm not looking for a partnership. I'm not looking for a relationship. It's like my girlfriend or wife, whatever. At that point, I think it was like it was like she's back at home, and so like, and he had this whole thing was like, oh well, my girlfriend knows, that like when I come to Burning Man, this is my like hall pass. It's my time to like kind of like go and have fun. And I was like, oh, that's great, good for you, whatever. But I thought I was like, I actually have a lot more fun hanging out and like meeting people and talking to people and like talking to women like and then when I get to that point in the conversation where I just go blah 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 my wife blah 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 and then they're just like wait what I mean some people actually kind of turned off and you can see the turn like and then they run away. I'm like what, we're having such a great conversation,
Yeah.
like, well, some other people are just like, oh, you mean you're not trying to get in my pants right now? I'm like, no, it's like we're just having a good time. It's just like I want to talk to you for you. And they're just like, oh my God. They kind of just like and then we have so much more fun together.
It's a revelation, and let's be clear about this. Not going to Burning Man is a perfectly rational decision. I mean, it's completely defensible, and for that matter, not having sex at Burning Man is a completely defensible and rational
It might
decision.
sound strange to some people.
No, but it's dusty out there. I mean, it's actually in a lot of ways a really unerotic environment. I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're into comfort in any way, if you're going to struggle with that.
Yeah. And then also like as my listeners probably should know by now, like the last year is my first year back and I'd taken like about 13 years off, and I came back. And one of my revelations was actually getting a good night's sleep.
Hmm,
Like
right.
not just once or twice, but like every night. Going to bed at like maybe 11:30 or 12, and then like waking up in the morning and like everyone's just like crawling into their tent, and they're like, "Arr," and I'm like, good morning, sunshine. Like I was like, I had like the best experience. And people were like, you sure you don't want to go get wasted? And I was like, actually, no.
There's a,
Like, I've had like such a great experience.
there's a real difference between night burners and morning burners. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Oh
They are
yeah.
they're very different experiences. I've
Yeah.
always I've I've always been more interested in the human scale art experiences. And so in many ways the daytime when all of the theme camps are open and people are out there, doing their art and their rituals and their invitations is generally my favorite time. I've had some amazing, if not transcendent experiences at night, absolutely. But the thing that I go for, the thing that keeps me coming back is those human encounters, which, often are so much more facilitated during the daytime when everybody is doing their theme camps and focused on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like the nighttime was kind of fun for like wandering around on the playa,
Sure.
like
Oh
the
yeah.
and they're just like the visual effects of like like the below like on the horizon is kind of like all these blinky lights, but below is dark and above is dark, and there are strange lights below and above, but, and it's also like one of the few places I've been where it's like you can be completely utterly sober, but you'll feel like you're tripping.
Yeah,
Just
no,
like,
That's a significant magic trick. That's a profound aspect of the sort of psycho magic that is Burning Man. And again, I'm not, I've had transcendent experiences at night, wandering from, big of tent to big tent, from weird party to weird party, and I've had a long tradition of at least once a year, usually twice, going out to the trash fence at night and singing there. And it can be utterly beautiful, sublime. But the kind of things that got me interested in the first place, when I was saying that I was going to the regional events, the Colorado regional, these other parties, and I was like, wow, these aren't like ordinary parties. These are interesting for me. That was sort of the theme camp mentality. That was the sense of, okay, we're gonna do something together that is weird and interesting for its own sake, and imaginative, and we're gonna hope people come and that we can offer them this experience. That sort of gifting of experiences was what really pulled me in and intrigued me, and that stayed with me this whole time.
Yeah. So when you went to Burning Man first time in 2006, and you said you just moved to San Francisco, didn't really know anybody, and so you
Yeah.
you volunteered. So what would you volunteer with? What department?
Okay, well, that's a bit of a story too. So, I they were putting on a volunteer fair kind of event at their headquarters at the time. That this was, I think, the Third Street headquarters back then.
China Basin, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I went out and I looked around. I didn't really know anything about the org at the time, and so I was sort of looking around. And then I saw that they had a media team in Media Mecca, and I went, oh, okay. Well, I'm a reporter. I'm a journalist. I have a long history with this. I can volunteer for that. And so I went over and met Andy Grace, Action Girl, and she said, okay, well. You sound great for us. We'd love to have you, but we've just moved all of our volunteer applications online. So what I want you to do actually is go back home and call up the website and, go to the volunteer page and fill out the volunteer questionnaire and click in Media Mecca and mention that we talked, and that'll get you in. That'll be fine. And I said, oh, okay, sure. So I went back home and I called up the website and I went to the volunteer page and looked at the volunteer survey, and I was so disappointed. Oh my God. Just
What?
floor dropped out from under me. And I was so sad because it was a completely conventional volunteer survey application. It was the sort of thing you'd get at any nonprofit or, event.
Mm.
It was not interesting at all. It didn't feel like Burning Man at all to me. And, I'm here for weird experiences and interesting art and, radical self-expression and unbridled creativity. And this was none of that. It was all conventional questions. And so I was so disappointed and depressed by it. And then it occurred to me, okay, well, if maybe this is my maybe this is calling on me to make it all of these things. Maybe if the form is boring, I have to make it interesting. And so I took a few days and I spent a long time putting together what I would like to think is still the weirdest, funniest volunteer application that they have ever gotten. That I tried to screw with every single question. So for emergency contact, I talked about how I was going to kick their ass in the event of an emergency because I'm a cynic and an alcoholic. So have at you. For what your goals are, what you'd like to achieve. I wrote to finally crush the amazing Spider-Man, and I wrote this long essay about how I've been trying for all these years to destroy him. He was my nemesis, and I never seemed able to do it. It was almost like he had some kind of, I don't know, spider sense that warned him of danger. I couldn't understand it, but I finally had it. I finally had the right team, and then I talked about all the supervillains I'd assembled who were going to crush him, and then it's really going to be great. I'm going to do it finally. My only regret is that I'm not able to share all of this with my best friend Peter Parker, who I've known for years, but we've just been so distant recently. But that's okay. After I destroy Spider-Man, plenty of time to get back in touch with him. So I made every question like this, and then I sent it in, and of course I didn't hear back that day, and I didn't hear back the next day, or the day after that, or that week, or that month. And by
Really?
yeah, and by that point, I sort of figured, okay, well, I guess I was too weird for Burning Man. That's too bad, but
Too
probably
weird for Burning Man. Wow.
that's what I thought, because all right, but probably better that we know that now, instead of finding that out later. Um, and then a year and a half went by.
What?
A year and a half went by, and then I got an email from Andy from Action Girl.
Uh,
Now, what I had not known, I had no way of knowing, is that the media team had basically been dumped in her lap right before that um, volunteer fair that I'd gone to. She
uh,
just sort of inherited the team. Somebody else had quit, so it was on her plate now. And so, there was sort of a wide reshuffling of personnel at the time, and so a whole lot of things had just fallen by the wayside as they got organized, and volunteer recruitment was one of them. So I so what had happened was that they had realized, okay, we have a shortage of Media Mecca volunteers this year. What are we going to do? And the woman who ran volunteerism for them at the time, wonderful woman by the name of Terme, um, said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the applications we got in the last year and a half, and we're going to find a volunteer coordinator from that. And so they were going through all these applications, and Terme came upon my application, my weird ass, funny as you can make it, surreal, absurdist application. And she laughed her ass off. She printed it out. She walked it over to Andy's desk, said, "Here's our guy." Andy laughed her ass off and then sent me an email saying, "Oh my God, how did you fall through the cracks? Clearly, we need a volunteer coordinator. Do you want the gig?" And I was offered it entirely because I made them laugh. That was the entirety of my qualifications for this. I mean, I had other qualifications, but they didn't know that because I'd made the application super weird. Um, so I sent her an email back saying, "Gosh, Andy, it's really good to hear from you after all this time. I admit I've thought about Burning Man between then and now, but I have to be honest with you. I'm with the Aspen Music Festival now, and we're very happy together. And they respond to me, and they take my survey answer seriously. So, thank you, but I'm very happy. It's good to hear from you though." And then I signed it, and then at the bottom I wrote in all caps, "P.S. Oh, who am I kidding? It's you, it's you. It's always been you, 1,000 times yes." And so
so
that's
what do
how
you so
that's
what
how
do
I
you
became
think happened? Like, did it just kind of fall through the cracks? Like, I mean, did they, like I said, was it just kind of like just kind of office chaos? Just like they.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know perfectly well that, organized Burning Man is something of a contradiction in terms, and they do their best, but it's a fairly haphazard thing, and professionalism has always been third or fourth as far as that goes, especially back then. And I mean, it just, yeah, I think that, I mean, the media team was blessed, I would come to learn, with a strong foundation of really experienced and dedicated team captains, and so they were basically able to let volunteerism fall through the cracks for a year or so before it became clear that, oh shoot, we have to actually pay attention to this, because they had such a deep and dedicated bench of really talented, qualified people. I mean, yeah, it was just, the organizational screw ups happen, and when you throw a whole new team plus some other responsibilities on somebody new all of a sudden, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah, because I'm trying to think that was what 2006, 2007 ish, like
yeah,
that time.
2000, 2006, 2007. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that Andy was like heavily involved with like the regional network before that, right? And so I think they took her out of the regional network and put her in Media Mecca.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
For on
something like
communications. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Wow. So what was that like 2007, 2008? You kind of was this like the year round like I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you'd say staff where you're like just a volunteer.
Volunteer staff, year-round
Yeah.
volunteer staff. Yeah, it wasn't a paid position. Virtually none of the work I have done for Burning Man has been paid. There was a 3-year period where I was part-time contract staff. I insisted on being part-time contract actually, as opposed to full-time staff, where I was the senior writer and researcher for their education program. That was 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. But other than that, the entirety of my time and work with Burning Man has been volunteer. But yeah, I became year-round volunteer staff. That was a year-round position.
Oh, okay. And were you working with like Nurse and Yams and
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, no, those were some of my earlier episodes this year.
Yeah,
Like
Nurse Yams, Polaris,
yeah.
yeah, great, great group of people.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tom Laporte,
So is now Media Mecca is like comms or something? Is that what it is? Or is that different?
Media Mecca is under the comms department. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've been kind of interfacing with them a little bit Because I remember like last fall before I interviewed Andy, and she was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you got to go to comms first," and then I was like, "Get their permission," and I was like, "Okay," and then I did, and I was like, "I got permission for Andy," and I was like, "Just so you know, I'm going to be interviewing a lot of people." It's like, "Do you want me to talk to you guys every single time?" And they were just kind of like, you're good, go ahead."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah. Then this year on the play, I'm gonna be. I think I don't know. I mentioned this to you. We were talking before, but I'm doing this whole shadow shorts thing where it's kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. We would put like 5 minutes on the clock, and I'm gonna like challenge people to say, what's Birdie Man's impact on you? Go, and I'll see what I get.
Yeah.
I don't know. More information will be about that. Will be coming up in I think the next episode after this, my dear
That's
listeners.
part of the big season ending twist.
Yeah, but wait, there's more.
Yes.
There's a Ginsu knife.
Is now the time that I admit that I shot Larry Harvey? Is that
Oh, but that's for your deathbed. You just can't be
too
your
too soon?
deathbed
Okay,
yet.
too soon. We'll cut that in post, and I'll admit it later. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's also the other thing about this. It's like I don't do any editing because I'm extremely lazy. But I sell it to my guests as so it's like, no, this is like your authentic voice. It's like I'm not gonna, kind of twist it and change it. It's like, oh, I'm gonna make you say this and that. Like yeah. So wow, so have you gone pretty much every year since then? So you went like 2006, 2007, like I mean, except for
I skipped 2007, but every year after that, up until the pandemic, I didn't go to the Renegade Burns. I did go again in 2002, and that was my last one actually. I
22.
22. Yeah, sorry, 2022. Yeah, I did not go for the Rain Apocalypse, and I didn't go last year in 2024. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, there was an unbroken stretch of about 15 years when well, unbroken except by the pandemic. When yeah, I went every.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know some people prize that it's like a point of pride. It's like I went straight every single year, and I'm like, eh. I mean, for me, it's just like I went like 3 or 4 years straight, and then like took off a year, then went, and
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
life intrudes, and then
oh, absolutely. I mean, there's more to life than Burning Man. Absolutely. I think for me it was several factors. One of which is being that, of course, living in San Francisco and volunteering for the org, it was always, the path of least resistance to go in many ways. Uh, I knew so many people going. It's not that long a drive. My logistics were all, basically
yeah,
set up. I knew so many people who could help with anything I needed. It was in so many ways the 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 easier path. Just going to Burning Man was going downhill. There was, in fact, there was one year, 2018, 2019, or something, when I actually started telling friends of mine, I have very complicated feelings about this whole thing right now. My relationship with the project is sort of in a weird place. I'm thinking of not going. And my friends, said, "Oh, well, we understand, of course. That makes a lot of sense. We will really miss you, but we understand what you're saying. On the other hand, have you considered going for 3 times as long?" And yeah, that's when I discovered that under the right circumstances with the right people, a pressure campaign can work on me. And so suddenly I was there for the week before build, and then the full thing, and had an amazing time. No, fight it. It was on the one hand very easy for me to go in that sense, and so of course I did. Also, there was a sense of purpose. I mean, you know, uh, I spent 5 years doing the Media Mecca position, so of course that pulled me in, and then um, it was interesting. Then after I left that position, the year that I went, I felt a sort of an aimlessness that I think is very common for people who who spend a lot of time working for the man and then leave their position and go without that. There's a real sort of emptiness, a hollowness to it, a listlessness. What
Like
am
a
I?
midlife crisis, like a burnout.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, I mean,
What do I
you
do now?
you spent years being part of what makes this thing go, and now you're there again, but you don't have. It's like retiring. What do
Yeah.
you do with your time? And what I discovered was that I had to then actively push myself out to be in situations where I was going to encounter the unfamiliar, that lacking the pressure of, okay, I have a thing to do, that I'm here and this is such a weird environment that the weird is just going to come to me. I had to go out and find the weird. I had to start wandering around the city in ways that I normally wouldn't have had to, just to see whatever happened next, because that's an environment where you don't know what's going to happen when you cross the street in there. That's one of the beautiful things about it. But I realized for the first half of my time there that year, I was in a rut, that I was basically going from friends camp to friends camp in a sort of a circle. Okay, let me go to BMIR. Okay, let me go to Media Mecca. Okay, let me go to this camp. Let me go to that camp. And I was just doing that cycle. And so I was seeing all my friends all the time, which was great, but it wasn't magical. It wasn't what I the weird, extraordinary, can this even really be happening kind of impossible experiences that I loved about this thing. But then when I pushed myself out into new environments, where I went to places where I don't know anybody here, I have to figure out what's going to happen next. So what I'm doing here, then immediately the magic came back.
Yeah. I I imagine that's probably kind of liberating, because I mean I've talked to like a number of people, like actually the episode that just dropped like yesterday with Adriana
Mhm.
Roberts, and I remember she was talking about like, oh, she'd been going to Burning Man straight for like 30 years or whatever, and then she was like, oh, she took time off. She's like, I'd go back, but then I would feel weird, I feel like a stranger, and she's like, and I totally get that. I felt the same way. It's just like it's like the loneliest of lows. It's like, oh, you were like a part of it and doing all this stuff, and now you come back and like nobody knows who you are, but. I think it's like you're saying. It's like that could also be like an opportunity. That could be like a challenge. It's just to
It
kind of refresh and renew. It's just
it
yeah,
absolutely is. In fact, a couple of years later, when I was in that period where I was officially working for Burning Man, I resisted very strongly the requirement to carry a radio on or with me where I went around, because I'd had to do that occasionally at Media Mecca, and it just changes the experience that you have that you have with people, because the first thing they notice about you is, oh, you've got a staff radio, and so all of a sudden all the conversations that they want to have with you are premised on the fact that you're a Burning Man staff member with the radio, and
yeah.
it's
It's
just
also a weird status symbol to some
it
people too. It's like,
is.
oh, you have a radio. Oh, we have two radios.
Yeah, no,
Like
it was exactly the kind of experiences that I didn't want to have with people. It was imprisoning, and so I would get into these heated debates with Stuart Mangrum, who was my supervisor. Stuart wanted me to wear a radio, and I would say, why? What's the point of this for me? And he said, well, in case we need to reach. I was like, I do education and philosophy. What kind of crisis is going to happen?
you don't know.
Oh,
You
yeah,
don't
no, we
know.
need a
There could be.
philosopher right now. Can someone explain Heidegger's stats? I mean, come on.
But you can't just have one. You'd have to have a crack team, right? And then you would have to have like a specialized vehicle. It's kind of like the Ghostbusters. You have like a special siren.
Back in Larry Stewart and I, when we were doing the philosophical center together, we had talked about having a philosophy art car that would go around and blare philosophy lectures at people. Just as we're riding down the street. That would be our noise pollution.
Oh my God, that'd be awesome.
I deeply regret that never happened. Yeah.
Yeah, but that
Um.
also just kind of sparked. I don't know. Like I just get these crazy ideas. But the whole radio thing. Like I remember years ago, someone would make these like fake like backstage passes, and they're just like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, it's like they don't give these out to people. But, like, here has a special gift to give to you. It's like this is an all access backstage pass. It's like you can get it to the commissary, you can get it, to, the burn circle. Like you can go to Larry Harvey's RV. You can go anywhere you want. People are like really, like yeah. But it's like, what if you had like the backstage pass and like fake radio camp? Like where people come up and we're just like, please take one of these fake radios.
That is inspired fuckery. Yeah, I like that very much. Yeah. But no, it was very liberating actually to realize that, yeah, I can just, because I'd been to Burning Man exactly once prior to being on staff at that point. And so it was, me discovering, oh yeah, I can wander around the city. I can have these whole different kinds of adventures. It was liberating. And at the same time, I often think that the single most useful piece of writing that I've ever done about Burning Man outside of the book was a piece called "It's Okay to Be Miserable at Burning Man." Which recognizes the fact that we are going to have these incredibly lonely, sad, miserable experiences, and that the best thing you can do with them. I mean, I am personally guaranteed two major existential crises for every week I am out on playa. That's a minimum.
Yeah, I read that in the book, and I was like, God, have I been doing this wrong all these years? Like, I mean, there's been plenty of like misery for them, this
Yeah.
or that, but I'm just like, yeah, people are like, oh, if you don't cry on the playa, you're not doing it right. I'm like, I don't think I've
I'm
ever
not
cried. Yeah.
outside of very limited circumstances. I'm not big on telling people they've been doing it right or wrong.
Yeah.
But for me, it's been very clear that you know if I go to Burning Man, I am going to have playa meltdowns and be lonely and miserable sometimes and wonder, what am I doing there? And that the best thing for it is not to try to deny it, not to go, clench my teeth and my fists and go, no, I'm having fun. I'm having the best time. But to be completely honest about it, because when I think you are honest about that and expressive and authentic about it, then it's much easier for it to flip. Then it's much easier for it to suddenly, change into this weird, magical, emotionally abundant place. But that's that sense that people have of, coming out and feeling terribly lonely and wondering, wait, what am I doing here again? I'm no longer with my friends. I don't have a sense of purpose. That's real. That is very real. That's a part of the existentialism of the whole thing.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think nowadays, I don't know if it's an evolution or whatever, but like a lot of I was gonna say younger burners, but like pretty much in my experience, it's like most everybody gets into Burning Man like in their 20s. It's like when I was like 25, 26.
Mhm.
Like I think most people you do burners are like I mean half the people go there like in their 20s, but yeah, I mean like with the temple and it's very cathartic, people kind of like letting go of people they love or saying goodbye and I don't know, even just the whole like the transformation, I'm like yeah, yeah. I mean, just don't force it. It's like
No,
it's like
I think
it's a gift that
that's
might come and get hit you or not.
That's really important, actually. Black Rock City and Burning Man culture generally are absolutely one of the biggest drivers and creators of transformative experiences that I think the world has ever known. And yet, I also think it is hugely counterproductive to tell people, if you go, you're going to have a transformative experience. Have you
Yeah.
transformed yet? And that sets up all of the wrong incentives and
And if it
all.
doesn't happen, it's like, oh, there's something wrong.
Right, yeah. Did I do it wrong? No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. And part of the reason why it is so transformative is precisely because it is open to the full human experience. Radical self-expression is not just happy talk. It's not just happy thoughts. It's not just, fun and joy. It's openness, radical self-expression, immediacy. It's open to the totality of the human experience, and that includes all of the stuff that we would classify as negative. It's why Thunderdome is so brilliant. This is the home for aggression on Playa, where it is channeled into an art experience, and that's fantastic. But that's just it. Is that Black Rock City is not a consumer ride where it's measured by how much fun people are having and how big their smiles are. It's a city, it's a place. It,
Hmm.
it has the same amount of the human experience that New York City has, that Toronto has, that Moscow has, that Buenos Aires has. And the stories of a place like that, they cover everything. And so when we go to Black Rock City, when we go to Burning Man cultural spaces, we are having an experience that is the totality of our existence, and that's what makes it so extraordinary and what makes the transformations that we have possible. And if we try to limit it down to okay, you're going to have a transformative experience or you're going to have the best time, we try to limit it like that, then we're arbitrarily lobotomizing it, at which point
Oh yeah. Oh
wreck
yeah.
it.
I don't know. It just made me think of like, an awesome art piece out in the play. It'd be like a cardboard cut or a plywood cutout of like a clown, and it's like, are you like the hand up here? Like, are you having this much fun, or like, is your
Hey,
smile this big?
yeah.
Like you're doing it right. If you're this big, measure your smile here. Like you've been transformed.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's such the it's the everything they say about Burning Man with transformative experiences is true, but the way we talk about it is as if that's a requirement, as if, that's it's not a, result of Burning Man as opposed to the purpose of Burning Man. It's so counterproductive.
Yeah, I think it's just have fun. Don't be
No,
so serious.
the purpose of Burning Man, I'm so explicit about this, is to have an experience of Burning Man. There is no other purpose. The rest of it is what you bring to it and what you get out of it. And that's exactly right. The minute we start to say, oh, well, Burning Man is a driver of innovation and community building, and we start to lose the thread at that point. What we
Hmm.
discovered through Burning Man is that if you give people the ability to do basically anything they want, eventually most people will build community and make art. That's just sort of what happens. But it's not because we are telling them, oh, you have to make community and build art. It's not because it's an externally imposed extrinsic thing. It's something that over time they discover they want intrinsically. And that's a completely different process. And, so the fact that Burning Man is such a great driver of community and art is not because we have an agenda of community and art. The reason why it drives innovation is not because we have an innovation agenda. It's because we let people discover what they want to do, and we create an environment in which so much more is possible.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of yeah, like one of the things like the 10 principles, like some people think of it as more of just it's like, oh no, there's almost like dogmatic. It's like these are the steps. Like this is this is what you must do and like to reach like it's not quite like Scientology, like you go through these different stages and you
Yeah.
get to clarity, you clear your mind or whatever, but yeah, it's like setting the stage for you to find yourself and to find your own radical
Right.
self-expression, like whatever that is,
Right.
it's like there's no,
The minute the 10 principles become kind of a checklist or a set of dogmatic rules, they lose their ability to do what they do. The 10 principles are sort of the conditions under which this experience of Burning Man, this experience of burning happens. If you have these 10 elements, then you're likely to get this kind of experience going. But what that means is that it's going to be different for everyone because we're all coming at it from different places. What's
mm,
radically self-expressive to one person is, not for another. Some people are much better at emotional vulnerability or creating art projects and so on. So the question isn't, are you doing X, Y, and Z? It's, are you pushing yourself into this realm? It's not, are you, checking off box X saying, okay, we've been inclusive, but are you pushing your own capacity for inclusion? I mean, another thing I wrote is that radical inclusion ought to make us feel uncomfortable. If we are completely comfortable with how inclusive we're being, we're not actually being inclusive. We're hanging out with our friends.
that's
There,
true.
there should be some effort to bring in people who you are not entirely comfortable with. And absolutely, safety counts and community responsibility counts. In fact, civic responsibility and communal effort are both 10 principles. They balance against each other, but they're in tension. But if we're not pushing our own capacity for inclusion, then we're not really being radically inclusive. And if we're not pushing our own capacity for self-expression, whatever that is, then we're not being radically self-expressive. And so, yeah, it's not a series of, boxes or checklists, let alone, here's how you do radical self-expression. Here's the kind of costume you wear. That's all completely counterproductive. It's a
Yeah,
question of, are you really throwing yourself into this? And if you
yeah,
are, you're gonna get to Burning Man. And if you're not, you're going to be going through the motions of Burning Man, and they're
yeah.
completely different
But
experiences.
also, I think it's kind of like what pretty much most people, especially like lay people from the outside, see as Burning Man, like the whole radical, the self-expression, like the crazy diversity of expression.
Mm.
It's like if it was like, okay, radically express yourself amongst this list of like 8 different things,
Right.
it's like
Yeah,
this would be Disneyland or something,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it'd be utterly pointless. I wouldn't want to go to that party. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's like you can choose whatever you want as long as it's on this list.
right, yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But I also find that's one of the big misunderstandings that people have about Burning Man is that people who have not been through this experience often genuinely have no idea what being radically self-expressive would actually be like. It's just not something that's occurred to them, let alone in sort of practical terms. And what would I do if I were going to
Yeah.
be radically self-expressive? Same thing with decommodification. They genuinely have never thought about what it actually takes to try to be in a decommodified space or a decommodified culture, even for a limited time. And so it just doesn't make sense to them. And so you're trying to have this conversation and explain this, and they 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 haven't seen it, so they don't understand it because it is fairly alien to our default world culture. And so it's actually one of the biggest handicaps of explaining what we do is that actually, unless you're in this particular situation, these things don't tend to come up enough that you have a practical sense of what it could actually mean.
Did people ever come up to you and be like, "How do I radically express myself?"
Rarely, rarely that bluntly. But it has happened. Yeah. Uh, it's,
Wow.
it's usually coached more along the lines of what does this mean, by which they mean tell me what to do.
Tell
That
me, yeah.
there's sort of an implicit tell me what to do here. I know this is supposed to be important, but I don't get it. So you tell this to me.
Do you counter with like, "No, you tell me," or it's like, "Oh, what is this? What do you think? What does this look like to you?"
I try, yeah. I mean, I try to go more gently into that.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, but yeah, fundamentally, it's because it is what is it for you? But also, I think if time allows, if time and circumstances allow, the best thing to do if you're on playa is to say, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's wander around and see what's happening here and pay attention to what we're seeing, and that'll make it apparent because so much of this, I mean, linguistic analysis and abstract thought is not the basic unit of meaning in Burning Man culture. Action is the basic unit of meaning in Burning Man culture. It's not an orthodoxy, it's an orthopraxy. It's what you do that matters. And so I think for so many people, seeing it happen is so much more useful than having it logically explained to them. It's just so much more helpful. This is actually I like to say that Burning Man taught me what it means to give a gift. And that's a really real thing for me because prior to going to Burning Man, giving gifts was always associated with a requirement for me. It's a holiday, therefore we give someone a gift. It's a social obligation, therefore we give someone a gift. I had never really it is a little embarrassing to be honest, but I never really received a kind of gift, let alone given one that had made me go, "Oh my God, this is, this is so separate from any sense of obligation that it means something else." And then I went to Burning Man, and suddenly I was in this gift-giving culture, and my eyes just popped, and I realized there was again, like, for the first time when I was going to the regional events, and I went, "I don't like parties, but I like this. What's going on? I want to know more." Suddenly I was like, "Oh, they're giving gifts in a way that I don't understand how to do. I would like to learn how to do this." And so I practiced and I tried, and eventually I like to think I got decently good at it. But that was I couldn't have been it couldn't have been explained to me. It had to be shown. I had to see that. And I think that's true of so many different aspects of the 10 principles and of Burning Man culture generally, is that we learn by doing. Action is the basic unit of meaning, not the thoughtful abstract explanation of it.
yeah, yeah. And also, a lot of times when I think of like the gift, and for me, like how I kind of learned about it, or what struck me was it's just kind of like thinking outside of your own shell, and it's just it's like you're not alone in the universe. It's like, and it's like there are other people around you. It's like, and you know what, it feels good to, I mean, it feels good to you to help somebody else, to like to give with of no expectation of a return. It's like, I mean, and it's just like you said in the book, it's just a skill. And it takes a while to learn it, because it's like, you can just be like, oh, I'm just getting a bunch of Jolly Ranchers and just throwing them at people. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
But,
just art there. It's not nothing. But,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
all of the 10 principles are actually skills in that sense. They're things that if you practice them, you get better at them. And if you get better at
Hmm.
them, then you change. And as you change, your capacity to do them increases too. And so
But
there's
they're not like inherent. Like you can't just like show up as a burner. It's like, okay, here are these 10 principles. Like, go and do them. It's
right.
like, okay. I mean, maybe leave no trace, but even that, it's like, oh, I didn't realize, that cutting wood gets like sawdust places. I mean, there's a million things. He was like,
Leaving
oh, I
no
didn't.
traces that can actually be fiendishly complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, people who do resto well are, that's they got skills. They practice this. They've developed.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't realize that. I was reading it in the book. Oh, and also just to tell the listeners, one of your books, I actually just finished it last night. Um, was it the scene that changes cities, or
Team that became cities.
was
Yeah.
it became cities? Yeah, excellent, excellent book. All of you should go out and get it and read it. It's like it's amazing.
Cool.
Um, so okay, so you started with Media Mecca. You said you worked there or volunteered to, slash worked there for 5 years. What did you do after that? Was that like
Okay. So
2013 or something?
yeah, I was the volunteer coordinator of Media Mecca for 5 years, from 2008 through 2013, and then so around 2010, 2011, I got a additional gig with Burning Man when I started to write for the Burning Man blog. Now it's the Burning Man Journal, but I started to do that, and I got a very unique opportunity there, something that just doesn't really happen with organizations. What had happened was that while my job as volunteer coordinator for Media Mecca was much more about volunteer recruitment and logistics and so on, it wasn't a position where I was, supposed to explain Burning Man to people. Nevertheless, recruiting volunteers who are going to talk with the media, you end up talking about Burning Man a lot and in, our internal forums and email lists and so on. And Andy Grace and Will Chase both really liked the way that I was talking about Burning Man. And so
You should write that down.
well, and so yeah, so Andy sent me a note saying, "Hey, we're going to try to revitalize the Burning Man blog, and I'd like you to write for it. How do you feel about that?" And I sent her a response saying, "Yeah, I don't think that's a very good idea. Thank you for thinking of me, but no." And she said, "Well, that really surprises me. I did not expect that. Can we grab a coffee and talk about it?" And I said, "Oh, I'm always up for coffee with you. Andy's amazing." And so it actually, I want to go so far as to say every Andy I've met at Burning Man is amazing. But this is Andy Grace. So we sat down and she said, "I'm really surprised that you said you weren't interested. Can you tell me why?" And I said, "Well, I know that you think you want me to write for the Burning Man blog, but I've seen what is on the Burning Man blog, and it's all fine as far as it goes, but it's all very cheerleady, rah-rah, isn't this amazing? And that's not what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask much more complicated, open-ended questions about the culture, about the nature of this thing, about how it works, and that's just not going to be a thing that you're gonna really be able to do. So it's better that we keep the good relationship we have than me banging my head against the wall and accusing you of of not accepting my living up to this." And she said, "Oh no, I know you're going to want to write that. That's exactly why I'm asking you, is because
Hmm.
we want that. So now will you do it?" And I said, "Okay, I know you think you want that,
Be
but
careful what you wish for.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the minute I say something that isn't on message in some way, it's gonna get there's gonna be a back and forth about editorial control, and it's gonna get ugly. And I'm sorry, I just see this being a disaster." And Andy thought about it for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm just going to give you publishing credentials on our blog. I'm just going to give you credentials to post whatever you want, whenever you want, no editorial process. I'm just going to do that. Now, will you write for us?" And I said, "Okay, well, I think this is going to be a disaster, but yes, if you feel that strongly about it, if you're just giving me those keys,
We're
yeah,
like, let's see how long this lasts
yeah,
for. Like,
let's do that."
okay,
So
challenge
yeah,
accepted.
okay, exactly. So all right, I'll do that. And I have to say, there is almost no organization in the world that would do that, especially one with as much big of a media microscope on it as Burning Man. This was actually an incredible gesture of faith, both at me and in the idea that there was enough here to talk about, and that it could possibly go well. It was fairly extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I started writing, and lo and behold, it was an immediate hit. The approach that I was taking to writing about Burning Man, at least among the kinds of people who are going to pay attention to deep thinking about Burning Man, which is not all burners, let's be clear on that. But within that environment, it was a huge hit, and suddenly my social life changed overnight. But it was actually kind of a problem. This is one of the weirder aspects of my social life with Burning Man, because I was publishing things on the Burning Man Journal, and I was publishing things, no, back then it was still the blog. I was publishing things on the blog, and they were different kinds of things. They were much more challenging questions. They were, just saying, hey, I mean, among other things, I was accepting that there may be a dark side to all of this, or there might be challenges we have to look at. And so immediately everybody I knew who was involved in Burning Man culture started accusing me of being a consummate insider, because they would never let me write at this stuff if I wasn't deeply connected to the organization. And so I was actually now getting all these angry missives about ticket prices and about parking policy and why is the org doing this and why is the org doing that. I was like, I don't know. I'm not in any meetings. I just get to write what I want. Oh, sure you do. You just get to write what you want. Yeah, because that's how this works. And it was actually awful. I was people were demanding explanations for me for org policies. Again, I wasn't in the room at all. And finally, I came across the one magic phrase that made this go away, that convinced people that I was not, in fact, one of the ultimate insiders. I said, I've never even met Larry Harvey. And when I said that, people went, oh, okay. Yeah, you can't be an insider if you've never met Larry. All right, fine. And then they left me alone to write what I wanted to write. And so on the one hand, I had this, very successful, little, thing going on Burning Man blog, and it also incentivized me to never meet Larry, because I couldn't. That would ruin this for me. I
Well,
couldn't face.
how is that possible? I mean, like you were living in San Francisco, right? You were volunteering at Media Mecca, like in the office. I mean, you must have been there, right?
Larry did not show up a lot for the kinds of things that I went to. I mean,
Ah,
Larry could be fairly reclusive. You remember back in those days, there was actually a sign in headquarters: Larry Harvey does not exist.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
Larry was not out there, yucking it up with people. And so, but actually now I had an incentive not to meet him, which meant that occasionally I would be in a room with him by accident, and I had to not meet him. I had to actively avoid him in order to be able to honestly say this to people. There was actually a regional network after party that I went to, and true story. Marion was there, and she said, "Oh my God, you've never met Larry. You have to meet Larry." And I'm just thinking, "Oh no, what do I do?" And Larry came over, and I realized when I looked at him, oh, he is so stoned. He is not going to remember this. This doesn't count. And sure enough, he was so stoned that he did not remember it. It did not.
Yeah. I think the most times I've ever met Larry, either he or both of us were kissed.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so so I s- so my last couple of years at Media Mecca, I was actively avoiding Larry at that point. And then after I left, I was horrified to receive an email from him saying, in effect, this would have been 2013 actually, as I was leaving Media Mecca, saying that he had been reading my writing for some years and following it with great interest, and that he was thinking of putting together a philosophical center for Burning Man, and he would like to meet with me to discuss that. Could I reach out to Kelly and set an appointment with him? And I just, oh God. And that's when I was confronted with the question of, am I the sort of asshole who would refuse to meet somebody just so that he can keep his nice little social thing going? And I decided that I am not. Okay, I have to, all right. So I set up a meeting with him, and I went in with a great deal of trepidation, honestly, because I don't know how many of your listeners are gonna, know the backstory here, but even before I went to Burning Man or started volunteering with them, I was friends with Chicken John and John Law. And so they had been telling me horrible, horrible things about Larry. I was going in kind of prepared to meet some cross between Dick Cheney and Satan. Um, and so I went to his apartment with a great deal of trepidation and nervousness, not sure what was going to happen, and went in, and we really hit it off. just from jump, we just so hit it off to the point where I wondered if this was some sort of elaborate prank because we could not possibly be in that kind of sync. We
Huh.
surely he was messing with me here.
It's like, is this the real Larry Harvey
Yeah, we couldn't possibly be in the wrong.
impersonator?
But yeah, but
Well, what did that make you think about, like with John Law and Chicken John? Like after that, like the things that they told you about all those years.
I think that what you had was three very strong personalities who did not get along as personalities, who also happen to have some philosophical and conceptual differences. They, especially in their later years, they were not that far apart at all, actually. I remained friends with all three of them.
Hmm.
I don't think that their differences were all that great substantially, but that as personalities, they were more or less inevitably on a collision course. They just did things so very differently. And so I think, in the heated and those conflicts were all before my time too. I mean, it was
Yeah.
6 that things really, exploded and that years of acrimony followed from. And I came in, you know, 10 years later. So,
Yeah.
whenever things they had not mellowed yet, but they were in the, they would start to soon.
Well,
And
those are probably two other entirely complete episodes.
yeah.
We'll get to them another day. So yeah, so 2013, you go to Larry
So
Harvey's
I go to Larry
apartment, and
Harvey's. We hang out for 8 hours, and
wow, just the two
we
of you?
yeah, just the two of us. No, we really hit it off. It was and to be clear, it's not all that uncommon for people to have a first meeting with Larry and then hours later leave going, "What the fuck just happened? What was that?" That was actually that's not an uncommon origin story for Larry, but mine was unusually long, and we got unusually close. And so then when he formally founded the Philosophical Center in 2015. He invited me along with Stuart to sit on it with him as the founding members, and so I had a sort of a time off from official Burning Man for 2014 and where I was just hanging around, but still writing for the journal, still writing for Burning Man's website all the time. And then in 2015, I became a founding member of the Philosophical Center and did that, and then that led to my being invited to be on staff, as I mentioned before, for a couple of years as the writer and researcher for their education program. And uh, so those were the things that I was doing up until I left at the end of 2018, and the scene that became cities came out in 2019.
Mm. So for the listeners, what exactly was the Burning Man, or is the Burning Man Philosophical Center, or was and is? It's another
Um,
loaded question.
so I suspect I think it has changed significantly. I think it really there's a with Larry and an after Larry for that. Larry had designed the Philosophical Center to be a part of Burning Man's governance structure and to serve, as he put it, as Burning Man's conscience and collective memory. The Philosophical Center was where we were going to uh, try to have the deepest understanding of Burning Man culture and try to look ahead to see what issues were coming and organize ways to talk about it and basically a think tank about Burning Man's culture and history. And so we did the theme was always Larry's, personal fiefdom, and so we took the theme on, and for a number of years did large scale series about that based, about issues that emerged from the theme. So, for example, in 2016, the theme was Da Vinci's Workshop, and so we did a long series on art and money and the relationship between them, using
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
comparing Renaissance Florence to now and seeing what we can see about art and money then, which was a conversation that our community actually really needed to have.
I love
Art.
that part with the patriarchy and matriarchy. What do you
Yeah,
guys say about
oh
this? Like,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That was one of
yeah.
my big discoveries with that. Yes, the matriarchy is or matronage as opposed to
Matronage.
patronage.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's a totally different system, and there's historical precedent for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then in 2017, the theme was radical ritual, and so we did a series on the nature of ritual and Burning Man, and what does it mean in this context? What can we achieve from that? And then 2018, which was the year Larry died, the theme was iRobot, and so we did a series on AI that I think actually holds up remarkably well. Obviously, the technology has changed completely, but I think the
Yeah.
thinking in that series was really good. And we held the occasional conference, and sometimes we would get questions from people in the regional network or elsewhere about issues, and we would try to respond to them. In fact, the last piece of writing Larry did was something that I was working on him with about the members of a regional community had questions about how to handle major gifts that people were trying to give them, but their companies were trying to give them. And is it okay to put their logo on on our website when we acknowledge that we gave them the gift and things like that? And so
Uh,
Larry was writing a piece that I was working on with him about not telling people what to do, but sort of suggesting here are better ways to look at the issue. Here's some clarifying questions. Here's
mm,
things that have worked before in our culture. So it was very much intended to be that kind of think tank. After Larry died, it went through a period of dormancy, and then Stuart became the director of the Philosophical Center, and the Burning Man's podcast, Burning Man Live, comes out of it now. So, but I think it was a very different entity then than it is now.
yeah. They do a lot of publishing, right? I mean, it's like not just the
They
podcast, some books and
they
stuff.
they put out some books, including one of mine that would be "Turn Your Life into Art: Lessons
Mm,
in Psychomagic from San Francisco's Underground."
yeah,
Uh,
get it
they
to
put
there.
out they put out I think three books since
Coyote's book, right?
and Coyote's book, my book, and a book about going to different regional events. Sort of.
Oh, what's it? Roxanne Jesse or
Yep.
something?
Yep.
Yeah, she's another on my list. I gotta interview
Yeah.
her. Yeah,
But
yeah.
um, but so it did that. I'm not sure what the state of publishing there is now. Honestly, I think there's sort of I'm not clear on whether they're going to be producing another book. But um, but yeah, my time with the Philosophical Center is best thought of as being during that Larry period, being
Hmm.
from basically 2015 through a little after Larry's death.
Well, how about now and into the future? Like, how are you interfacing with the project, the community, and where do you see yourself going or contributing from here?
Sort of an open question, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the period after Larry's death was a very difficult one for me, especially since I had just gotten the contract to write The Scene That Became Cities. I had literally just gotten North Atlantic Press had just said, "Yeah, we have a contract for you. We'd like to, have you write this book, and we'll publish it on Burning Man culture and philosophy." And meanwhile, Larry just died. And not that I ever would have given Larry creative control over my book. He was not going to be able to just, go in and edit, but it never occurred to me that I'd be doing this project without him looking over my shoulder, without us debating robustly and having conversations. And so I had to write the book about Burning Man culture and Larry's, life's work right after he had gone, which was excruciatingly difficult, especially because you've just finished the book. It's a funny book. It's an upbeat book. I had to work very hard to make it that way as opposed to making it a sad palace to Larry, because the for all that I was in deep grief and mourning for my friend and colleague. Burning Man culture is not a sad palace to Larry, not at all. And the
Yeah.
book needed to read like as close to an experience of Burning Man as I could get it. So I after it was finished, I left Burning Man. I resigned my various things. Technically I never stepped down from the Philosophical Center, but I haven't been invited to a meeting in years. Um, and I needed to go grieve and have a breakdown, and I did. And I still wrote occasionally for the Burning Man Journal. I think actually I did a few pieces or some very good work over the last few years on that, but
Yeah.
never to the degree that I was before. I started writing Turn Your Life into Art. the next year, and I had not intended that to have anything to do with Burning Man, even though it emerged in some ways out of the Burning Man context. That book's much more about the San Francisco art underground that Burning Man itself emerged from, rather than Burning Man. But
Yeah.
then, much to my surprise, as my agent started to shop the book around, Burning Man contacted me and said, we'd like to do a book by you. And I said, well, I actually have this one that I'm just shopping around, and it turned out to be a perfect fit. So it's funny. My book about Burning Man was published by an independent publisher, and my book about San Francisco's underground art scene was published by Burning Man. There's a little irony there that I quite like, but so Burning Man and I are in some ways, attached to the hip still, and probably will be for the rest of my life. I, occasionally get, requests to do interviews or, give presentations on psychomagic or Burning Man culture. I still occasionally write for Burning Man's website when the mood strikes me. But I have been much more focused on creating the kinds of experiences that I want, that I in many ways learned to do from Burning Man in my life where I live. I've sort of, in many ways, the impulse of the regionals to do Burning Man where they live has become the impulse that I am following now, which is that I can make my life like Burning Man, and so I don't necessarily need to go to the desert in the same way. I think also, to be quite candid, there has been a shift in the way Burning Man institutionally looks at philosophy and its own culture. And I think I think we are no longer we're not in sync in quite the same way on that. I think the prerogative that I have always had to be off message is a lot harder for them to stomach these days. And so I think, we're sort of drifting apart in that sense. Now I want to emphasize that, again, the deal that I had, was always extraordinary. It's not unreasonable for an institution to say we want to be able to sign off on something that gets published on our website. That's completely reasonable. But also, I had that prerogative, and I cherished it, and it's being able to say whatever I am thinking in pursuit of a deeper understanding of Burning Man culture is the price of admission for me. If I can't do that, then what am I doing? Um, so we're more distant now, to be honest, and I don't know that it will always be that way, but
Yeah.
that's where we're at this moment.
No, I totally understand like the similar kind of trajectory where it's like I took 13 years off, raised my son, and then slowly being pulled back into the and I was like, oh, should I get like back into bed with the organization? And I was like, oh, I tossed my hat back in the ring. Maybe I'll be like a regional contact. Maybe to go back to doing what I was doing before, and none of that seemed right. None of that
Yeah,
really kind of worked or gelled. And it's like, it's like, and I had all these ideas, and I had all these thoughts, and for me, what Burning Man was always about was it was always about this connection, a community, so I really wanted to be connected and part of the community again.
yeah,
And what really kind of struck me was that I was like I know so many people, but I really don't know so many people. So I was like, oh, and I always like, how about a podcast? Like, let me do what I like doing. It's like actually talking to people, But even better than that, it's just like let them to talk,
no,
you
absolutely.
know. And then it's like it's just my own thing. So then it's like, oh, I don't have like editorial control. Like no one's telling me what to do. And also, I'm not really. It's not the Andy show, you know. So I don't know. I mean, perhaps there's like, new avenues for radical self-expression for you in the future.
I'd like to think so, and I'm still very interested in having deep conversations with people about Burning Man philosophy and culture, and sort of stacking these ideas on top of each other to see what they can build.
Yeah.
I think Burning Man has a unfortunate habit when it sort of does these kinds of conversations, when it tries to talk philosophy and culture, of sort of basically creating an extended open mic where, anybody can come in and do their 5 minutes of time, and then the next person comes up and the next person comes up, and that's expressive and that's inclusive, and they say, okay, so that's what we do. And there's something to that. It's not the worst thing in the world, but also that's not actually how philosophy and culture work. You don't just have everyone throwing something down and then walking away. You have to have them paying attention to each other's ideas, and you have to have them in dialogue and discourse and sort of building things and saying, okay, this goes with that, this makes sense, that doesn't, we can keep this, we can and you see what you can build. At some point, maybe you're wrong and the whole thing topples down and you have to start over again. But
Yeah.
it's a process of building. And in that sense, I think of it as, with art projects, it's like welding. The Flaming Lotus Girls have this wonderful model where, if anybody wants to learn how to build giant art, they will teach them. But the point is that you can't be a welder on one of their projects if you don't know how to weld. They will teach you to weld,
Hmm.
but inclusion in this sense doesn't mean, oh, I have a welding torch, I'm just going to, use it indiscriminately. It means if you have the qualifications, if you know what you're doing, then yeah, there's a place for you to do it with us. And I think philosophy and cultural analysis is the same thing. We need people to, if you're going to have a real discussion about this, if you're going to move it in a good direction, you need to know what people have already said. You need to know what conversations came before. You don't have to agree with anything, but you have to be familiar with what happened, with what is happening, with the
Hmm.
the ideas, with where they came from. And so in that sense, I think, anybody should be able to participate, but they have to be willing to do the work. It's the intellectual equivalent of learning to weld. And I'm
Yeah.
very interested in helping with that. Not so that I, much in the same way that you were saying with your podcast, not so that I get to talk more, but so that I get to listen more.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, I was just the way as you're talking about that, just thinking about the whole story of like the 10 principles and how the 10 principles came about. It was like it
Mhm.
wasn't just Larry went off into a cave and like inscribed these in stone tablets and came down and he's like, I have these 15 10
Right,
principles.
right.
You know? But yeah, I
No,
mean, but like it kind of bubbled up from below, and then like
yeah.
as time went by, it got kind of codified, right?
Yeah, it was the 10 principles were not Larry being super smart. They were Larry saying, okay, when this culture is doing what we love about it, what's going on? What's happening? It was observing what was actually going on and finding a good way to describe it. And this is the remarkable thing about this. So, the regional network went to Burning Man org and said, we need a way to describe what we're doing. People don't know how to talk about it. It's a problem when we're talking to our neighbors, and we need to interface with. Can you help us explain what this is? And the result was the 10 principles, and that's extraordinary because you ask, the organizers, the leaders of a major new art movement, can you explain what you're doing? And they come back with about 600 words, a little more than 600 words. They didn't give a big, giant, complicated presentation. They didn't write a book. They didn't, Larry didn't, say, okay, here's, a series of lectures that you have to watch. It was 600 words. He said as little as he possibly could while still being helpful. That's extraordinary. That's brilliant, and it's also what makes so much of this possible is that he didn't over-explain it. He didn't try to, try to,
Oh
to
yeah.
dot
Yeah.
every I and cross every T. He said something helpful and then got out of the way.
But it's kind of funny because like nowadays, all these years later, there's tons of people who just think it's just like, oh yeah, like in 1986, Larry wrote down these 10 things,
Oh
and
yeah.
and then all these years later, it's like we all put on these white robes and we all sing, leave no trace, civic.
It's funny. Larry Stewart and I would have these arguments where Larry would say that all 10 principles were clear, even if they weren't evoked, even if we didn't have the vocabulary for them, they were all there on Baker Beach. And Stewart and I would basically call bullshit that, no, no, no. And Larry never claimed to be the guy who, he was all very clear that he got them through observing what the culture was doing, but he claims that it was all there at the beginning. No, 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 no. But he did discover that something was working, and he gave that room to breathe and to live, and then eventually was able to describe it in a way that is really helpful to us now. But that's just it. It's much more about being helpful. The intellectual work of Burning Man philosophy is not to be more right than other people. It's not to win an argument. It's to be helpful.
Yeah,
It's to be in that practical way of someone is stuck trying to figure out Burning Man and what to do. Can you offer them something that is helpful? And if you
yeah,
can, that's a good example of Burning Man philosophy. And if it's not helpful, even if it's completely right, if it's not helpful, not so much. Not so
yeah.
useful.
I remember like back like in the 90s, the phrase that I remember like kept being bandied about was like, it's like, what is Burning Man? It's like, it's an experiment in living,
Hmm.
and then there were people would kind of throw out like, oh, no spectators
Right.
or leave no trace, this and that. And then like, yeah. And then as years went by, and then it's like, I guess it got kind of codified, you know.
There's, I'm not entirely against codification up to a point. I actually think that, there was, I mean, part of the reason why I wrote The Scene That Became Cities was that there hadn't been a need before this. I mean, years before I wrote the book, Larry and I had been talking, and we agreed that there wasn't a need for anything like that yet. But as it got bigger and bigger, and more people came in who didn't have a personal connection to this culture, a culture which was always best explained by example and by people seeing it being done and doing it themselves, suddenly you
Hmm.
had a whole bunch of people who were trying to be part of this who had no such connections, and they were going to be talking about Burning Man anyway. That's the thing. It's not like, okay, if we don't say anything, nothing's going to be said. There was
Yeah.
there was now a need for this to be explained in a way that they would be able to access, that would hopefully get them to that next step of I'm doing something, I'm, with people.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind, The Scene That Became Cities was to create that bridge to make this more accessible. But again, the point was not to be able to tell people, okay, here's what you do, here's steps A, B, and C, here's the blueprint. It's to explain why there isn't a blueprint, but how you can still do it.
Yeah.
Codification is necessary to some extent as you grow, but you have to be very careful not to kill what you love. And
Oh,
that's
exactly. I mean, the whole reason why the 10 principles came about was because of the regional network and the
that.
community growing out. And something that I've just kind of recently been kind of made like more and more aware of is just how far and wide the regionals have grown, and just how many like they're burners. There's many burners who've never been to Black Rock City. It's like their entire experience is entirely in the regionals. And I remember for many years I was just like, well, if you don't go to the Black Rock Desert, like experience Black Rock City, it's like, are you really getting the real experience? But like now I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, there's different flavors,
Yeah.
but it's the same candy.
No, back when you started, there was no such thing as being a burner without going to Black Rock City.
Oh yeah.
Back when I started, it was sort of a suspect category of, well, people will call themselves burners, but they haven't been to Black Rock City. And then 10 years later, there was sort of a sense of, well, maybe you can be a burner if you don't go to Black Rock City. Now it's not even a question. So
Hmm.
you haven't been to Black Rock City, whatever, you're a burner. That's what are we talking about here? It's
Yeah.
it's an amazing evolution. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, the show is kind of going a little bit past the normal time, but this being Caveat Magister and the season finale, I guess, go a little later. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I don't know.
My pleasure. This has been a great conversation.
Perhaps.
Any last minute twists that we can add for next season?
Oh, there's someone coming up behind him with a knife right now. Don't turn around.
No. Then what will happen with Burning Man on Mars?
Oh no, oh no. Oh, Elon's got that covered. Don't worry. Well, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure and a joy.
Very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. The more reviews the show has, the more likely it will even appear in search results. Also, please tell a friend and share this show with anyone that you think might like it. Word of mouth reaches quite far, especially in the Burning Man community. If you would like to contact us, please send an email to shadowofthemanpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube. The links for all of these are available at shadowoftheman.com. Feel free to use any of these social media accounts to provide any feedback you might have. Your thoughts on the show are greatly appreciated. Thank you, and see you soon for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. Don't worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.